City of Stevens Point Plan Commission meeting, recorded Monday, August 5, 2019.
I have 6 o'clock, so we will call the City Plan Commission meeting to order. Can we get a roll call, please? I'll do
Mayor,
it. Oh, okay, you can do it.
Mayor Weeza.
Here.
Alderperson Kneebone.
Here.
Commissioner Arnson.
Here.
Commissioner Cooper.
Here.
Commissioner Haynes.
Here.
Commissioner Hoppy is excused. Commissioner Rice.
Here.
Okay, we do have a quorum, so we will move on. I want to let everybody know, first of all, there are seats up front here, and if the seats are full, we have an overflow room, which is the next room over. They have audio and video, but it's not two ways, so you'll have to listen if you wish to speak on an item, and we'll allow plenty of time for you to come back into this room to do your speaking. The agenda is a little bit, there's going to be some strategic timing of this because we have a special council meeting at 6:30. State statutes require us to post a specific time for all of our council meetings. So wherever we are on our Plan Commission agenda at 6:30, we will recess the Plan Commission, call the Common Council meeting to order, take action on a couple of items that are rather important and timely on the Common Council agenda, recess the council, finish the Plan Commission after reconvening, and then reconvene the council to finish out the agenda. Okay? It sounds confusing, but I got this. So item number 2 on the Plan Commission agenda, on page 3 of your packet, is the report of the July 1st meeting. And I would ask that we keep the audience chatter to a minimum. We have microphones in here that will pick up everything, and it will come back when we try and play it back for either those people who weren't able to make the meeting or people who listen to our radio station, TV station, or view it on our website. So I would appreciate that. Again, July 1st meeting minutes. Commissioner Cooper.
Move approval.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Arnson. Any discussion there? Comments from the audience? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that is approved. Item number 3 is a public hearing with subsequent action on a request from the Stevens Point Area Public School District for a conditional use permit to construct 2 additions and reconstruct parking lots at Stevens Point Area High School located at 1201 North Point Drive. Commissioners, page 9 of your packet. And what I'd like to do is have Kyle speak on this. As I mentioned earlier, Director Ostrowski will be leaving us, so we're trying to make sure we fill in the gaps. So I'm going to have Kyle speak to it as much as possible, and then if Director Ostrowski needs to add anything, we'll do that.
Certainly. So the Stevens Point Area School District is proposing additions as well as some interior renovation and the reconstruction of 2 parking lots at the high school. You can see on the screen there's the details of the addition. The property is split zoned R2 and B4. However, the majority of the school is on the R2 side of the zoning. And any addition to a school requires a conditional use permit, thus the request is before this body for approval in Common Council. You can see on the map the 2 parking lots that are being proposed. The northwest parking lot and the easternmost parking lot are proposed to be fully reconstructed. However, not much will change in terms of the design and layout of those parking lots. The major addition is going on the west side of the building, and it will be for expansion of the cafeteria as well as some restroom facilities for the field house. And the west side addition is for the shop that currently exists within the facility. Here are photos of the 2 locations. Again, on the left, you've got the existing west side of the school where the addition is going, and on the right, you have the location of the shop addition. Plan set here, site plan showing the additions. Here's an internal plan. Again, these are in your packets. The detail may be relatively difficult to see up on the screen. This is the western addition with the cafeteria. And here's the shop addition. In reviewing the conditions for the conditional use permit. We feel as though it's...
Hang on one second, Kyle, because our screen resolution is not the same. The dimensions?
You might have to reset it.
Okay, continue on, and Director
Sure.
Ostrowski can...
And all this is summarized in your packet. I apologize for the technical difficulty here. Basically, we feel as though the use is appropriate for the area, given the high-intense institutional use that currently exists. The additions are on the interior of the lot. They should not affect the neighbors. Again, the use isn't necessarily increasing intensity, but rather increasing the efficiency of the use on site to allow, some of the school students to stay on campus during the lunch hour rather than leave the campus. And we feel as though the design also is appropriate for the building and fits within the existing facade. And we would also note that because the school enrollment isn't necessarily increasing with the increased area of the addition, that we would waive the increase to the parking requirements. I'm fairly certain that they do exceed those parking requirements within the zoning code, but I do want to note that the zoning code does give the Common Council the authority to waive any improvements to the parking requirements. And again, they are not changing any access to the site. That'll all remain the same with the parking lot improvements. So with that, we would recommend approval with a few different conditions. One, they have not submitted a landscaping plan at this point, so we would ask that we be granted authority to approve that landscaping plan and that they obtain all additional building codes and meet all code requirements from a building standpoint. Also, if refuse containers are relocated or added to the site, that they be screened appropriately and landscaped, and that we would have approval for minor modifications in the event that plans change slightly.
Okay, before I open the public hearing, are there any clarifying questions from the commissioners? Seeing none, I will now declare the public hearing open. Anyone wishing to offer testimony on this request is urged to step forward, name and address for the record. Public hearing is still open. And for the third time, the public hearing remains open. Seeing no one wishing to speak, I will declare the public hearing closed and move it back to the commissioners for consideration. Commissioners, what are your wishes? Mr. Cooper?
I would move approval of the request as presented with staff recommended conditions.
And allowing staff to approve the landscaping plan?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Haynes. Any discussion there? Comments from the audience? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that is approved. That will go before our special common council meeting at 6:30, gentlemen. Item number 4 is a public hearing and subsequent action on a request from Susan Kerbel for a conditional use permit to operate an exclusive, non-owner occupied tourist rooming house at 1925 Church Street on page 31 of your packet, Commissioners. Kyle?
Recently, the Common Council approved an amendment to the zoning code to allow tourist rooming houses, specifically those that are not occupied by the owner, to be permitted as a conditional use within the lower classified residential districts. This is our first request for this use. The property has been identified previously, and I've got the home details on the board. In summary, it's a 3-bedroom home, 2 full baths, about 1,300 square feet. It does have a detached garage and a very long single-stall driveway. Again, the owner is not living on site and does not have the intent to live on site. Thus, the conditional use permit is required for them to operate a tourist rooming house similar to Air Bed and Breakfast. Here's some photographs of the home. An aerial photo showing, again, the house location and the driveway. In terms of the standards of review, this area is an older area of the city. There's a mix of uses that exist. Again, with the R3 zoning, there are some duplexes in the area. There's also some rooming houses that are grandfathered in within the area and some single-family homes. We do not feel, given the mix of uses that exist in the area, that this would be detrimental in any way to the neighborhood. I would also note that many times with this type of use, it's not fully occupied, so there's not somebody always residing within there. There could be weekends where there's not somebody booking the house It could be during, there could be a couple weekends where it's booked, and during the weekdays it is not booked. So I don't think the intensity of the site will necessarily increase, and I don't feel as though there'll be any other detriment because of the use, because there are certain deposits and things that are paid for during this use. So I think it will certainly be maintained to the same standard, if not a better standard, than single-family residences. I'll also note that the driveway could accommodate 3 to 5 vehicles, so in the event that all 3 bedrooms are utilized, they would have enough parking to accommodate the use. And we have not received, as of this point, any comment from the surrounding property owners.
But they were notified, right?
They were, yes, correct. Within a 200-foot radius, we notify all property owners within the surrounding area. With that, we would recommend approval with the conditions identified. These we've placed on a few of the other tourist rooming houses that we've approved within the community. Basically standard conditions identifying that they meet the state statute, that they register with the treasurer's office, pay the room tax fee, and a few other things identified in terms of, having a property contact in the event that we do need to contact the owner if there's a bad tenant staying there, or we have issues that need to be resolved.
Okay. And again, before we open the public hearing, any clarifying questions? Commissioner
I'm just
Arnson?
curious, what is the maximum capacity, the maximum occupancy? I see references, but how many would that be? 3 bedrooms, is there
So
specified?
in most cases, building code regulates it based off of square footage.
All right,
I believe for 2 occupants, you need 120 square feet. But again, I know our building inspector's here and could probably confirm that or not.
We'll get to that after the public hearing, Commissioner.
all right.
Any other clarifying questions before I open up the public hearing? Okay, with that, I will declare the public hearing open. Anyone wishing to offer testimony, step to the lectern, please, and state your name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm Susan Kerbel, and just wanted to verify that it's only 2 bedrooms that will be used, because currently I use this home as my business, and I operate an alteration business out of there, so I have 1 bedroom that's used as my sewing room, and that will be locked and when I have guests. So it'll just be 2 bedrooms, 4 people capacity, so it's not going to be, and it will only be rented out on weekends, because I work during the week there, so it's very minimal usage.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Public hearing is still open.
Hi, Cindy Nabel, District 3, and I know I'm not in your district, but I remember when this came up before, and I had been in approval of this being in more districts, because I think it can work that way, and I remembered, that's why I was wondering, why is that saying 3? Because I remember you used this as a business, so I would think that this is really an ideal way of doing this, compared to if someone's saying, okay, I don't live here, I'm here once in a while, I'll check in on the place. You got someone that's going to be there as a business owner, and I just feel that that really makes a huge difference on us being able to approve something like this. So
Thank you very much. Public hearing remains open. Public hearing is still open. And for the 3rd time, the public hearing remains open. I have to do that 3 times for every single one, just so you know, in case I start sounding like a broken record. 3rd time, public hearing is still open. Seeing no one else wishing to speak, I'm going to declare the public hearing closed and bring it back to the commissioners. Commissioners, what are your wishes? Commissioner Hartson.
I'd move to approve per the staff recommendations and conditions.
Okay, thank you. Seconded by Alderperson Kneebone. Any discussion? Comments from the audience? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that is approved. Item number 5 is a request from Carl Wires for a driveway exception to expand the driveway in front of the home at 933 Meadow Street. Commissioners, page 38 of your packet. Kyle?
I think it was last fall, we amended the zoning code to permit driveway exceptions under unique circumstances. I believe this is our 3rd request for a driveway exception. Basically, the applicant is requesting to expand the driveway within the front yard setback in front of the breezeway, which is part of the occupied space of the home. The code does not permit driveways to be within that area, thus they are making that driveway exception. The existing driveway is about 11 feet wide. It does flare out near the home, and they are requesting that they fill in an area that's shown on the site plan here, outlined in green. Again, that is in front of that breezeway. So you can see where the garage ends and there's a service door into the breezeway. They're requesting to fill that area in front of that breezeway. Here's a picture of the home here. With regards to the standards of review, typically driveways will mirror the garages that they service. Oftentimes, we also frequently find a driveway will flare out to an area alongside of the garage. In this case, they do have an area available to flare the driveway out alongside of the garage to create a wider driveway as well as create a separate parking area. With that being the case, it presents itself as another option to provide additional parking. So staff have not found a hardship to be present with regards to the request, and thus would note that in granting this request, we would think it would set precedent and similar requests may be made in the future. If the commission and the council feel like this is appropriate, I would, rather than granting the request, maybe recommend that an amendment to the ordinance occur which clarifies the driveways permitted within the front of breezeways. But again, know that there are certainly some breezeways that are quite large, and this could mean that driveways would result in being very large and not necessarily be aesthetically appealing and match with the house. So again, with that, and for that reason, we would request or recommend that the item be denied.
Okay. Any questions from the commissioners? Commissioner Arntzen?
Yes, I was just looking at it, and the suggestion that they could put additional parking on the east side. So was that saying that an open parking area next to the garage, or is that expanding the driveway, or is that both?
So it would be both. The code permits them to begin a flare 5 feet into the property. So they can flare the driveway out to the east on the right of the picture up on the screen, as long as they create a parking area alongside the garage. So they would be able to both expand their driveway, widen it to a maximum of 24 feet at the curb and 36 feet in the front yard setback. And then they would have to create a parking stall alongside the garage, which at minimum is 7.5 feet wide and 15 feet deep. And they do have the width of the lot to do that in the event that they chose to do so.
So, right, that was my understanding, and I guess as proposed, it would have less of an overall impact on things than had they built next to the garage and expand the driveway, even just for the stormwater effects. But really, what they are looking to expand and essentially fill or increase pavement is a lot less using the exemption than they would be able to do using current standards. And I think that would be a reason for the exemption request, is that granting the exemption would cause less damage than following existing regulations. So
Okay,
that's kind of my explanation for my take on it.
I understand. Does everybody understand what the commissioner was talking about? Okay. All right, comments from the audience? There's no public hearing here, so it's just, go ahead.
I'm Kathy Dugan, alderperson for District 8. In my district, a number of people had just gone ahead, I think before we needed to get a permit for driveways, and put concrete in the front yard, which is what they're really asking for. Aesthetically, it's pretty awful. In terms of the amount of concrete, I think Commissioner is correct that there would be more if they put it on the side, but aesthetically, it would be more tolerable, palatable. I have people in my district who have pretty much gone across the half of the half of the front yard. And I think this would be a little bit concerning to me. So I wouldn't like to start this sort of precedent. I'd rather that they parked on the street. At any rate, that's my
Thank you.
input.
Anyone else wishing to speak? We'll go with Alder Nabel, then Alder Jennings, then the applicant.
And quick jump up here. Thank you, Cindy Nabel, District 3. I understand this dilemma because I have a short parking area and I can only park 2 cars and it can only be one in front and one behind. That's it. You have to move cars around all the time. 40 years of doing it. Don't have any other option to do that because then there's trees and then there's my house. So that's it. So I do understand it, and I live right by the university, so I understand that problem too. This is a huge problem in Stevens Point, and unfortunately, like right now, we have now become really trying to clean up some of this by having now a permit. So there's something actually a permit, where before it still was required to go through a conditional use permit. So it wasn't that you had to get a permit like we're doing now, but there still had to be paperwork had to be done. Am I correct with that?
No, we did not require exceptions previously to driveways.
Okay, so then you could just widen it
Was,
whenever you
the-
wanted
The
to?
only avenue would have been a zoning variance?
That's what I'm talking about,
Okay.
being able to make it wider. So they had to come in and ask to get a variance to be able to do it. That was the word I was looking for, thank you. So there was something else. I mean, it wasn't that you could just go do this haphazardly. What was that? Yep, on the street, from the street part of it, okay. So then I was confused, thank you for clarifying that. We just got to be careful. I mean, we've had years and years of backyards becoming parking lots, and that's not good for our soil, our water, but it's also not good for our city of Stevens Point and what it looks like when people go to the university and around. We're putting money into the downtown to have it look good. Aesthetics make a difference. No matter if we think that is fair or not, it's true. It really does matter. But I do also agree that we've got to try to find ways to do this. And so I think what Kyle is trying to do is really a good idea, is maybe let's try to figure out how we're going to write this into an ordinance so that we can have something that can give some leeway, but not so much that it's overly where we're going to have now every person keeps coming to ask for another variance for something or another permit. Then we can have, all of a sudden, it's going to be bombarded with people. So the other thing could be that we've talked about how doing some of the gravel, adding that on, where that would help on at least the water problem with it. So, there's a few other things. You don't have to always do concrete. You could go with something that's less invasive and at least water can leach through. So I'm not against some of this, but I do like the fact that we're really looking at this and making some really time to really make some good decisions. So thank you.
Thank you. Alder Jennings.
Tori Jennings, Alder, District 1. This constituent is in my district, and this house is in my district, obviously. I am very concerned about precedent, and I definitely don't want us to jump into ordinance changes that end up with the consequence of adding lots more concrete. However, Mr. Wares contacted me early on, and I went to his house. I'm very familiar with this house. I think it is a slightly unusual situation in terms of the frontage to the street, and in agreement with the commissioner in terms of what is the best option with the least amount of concrete. This is a pretty small space that is looking at being expanded, and I have been very vocal about not taking up green space and taking up lawns with concrete. So the last thing I want us to do is to sort of force Mr. Wares into expanding his driveway to the east, expanding it out around the garage. I would oppose that, and I would encourage the Plan Commission. So anyway, that's just, I guess I'm just echoing your concerns, Commissioner, and thank you.
Thank you. Carl, you're up. Yeah.
Carl Wires, 933 Meadow Street. Thank you for your consideration. This year, I'm going to be replacing the concrete in my driveway, so this was the time for me to address this. I've wanted to be able to park a car in my driveway and back a car out of my garage all at the same time, and haven't been able to do that. When I thought about doing this, the idea of going to the east side of the garage, of course, occurred to me. It's in the ordinance. That's what you're supposed to do. And my understanding of the ordinance is that that's supposed to be a permeable pad, that it's supposed to be crushed granite, or is that not the case? Okay. Well, either way, number one, I don't want to put that much concrete because in the June 2017 storm, I had 24 inches of water in my basement. I don't need that happening again. And I don't want to have a crushed granite pad there because personally, I don't like those. Those are hard to maintain and they end up being overgrown with weeds. So I'm proposing this as a solution to give me what I want, trying to honor the ordinance. And honestly, if I don't get it, I guess I'm okay with that. But I think it's a good precedent to set because it does try to honor the ordinance so well. And that's what I'll leave you with. I think it could be a very good precedent to set.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Okay, then. So a couple of things. It occurs to me that we should probably look at the ordinance anyway. We had two alders speak against allowing the pad going to the east. However, the ordinance currently allows that. They spoke in favor of allowing this expansion, but the ordinance currently prohibits that. So it sounds like we have a little bit of work to do with the ordinance, and maybe that's the best option rather than setting precedent here. Actually say what we intend to say and mean in that ordinance. I would ask the applicant, I don't know what the square footage is, but have you considered, what do we call those, the turnaround pads? Where you could put a
Reverse
pad, which wouldn't allow parking on the side of the garage, but maybe allow you still to park that other car in there? I'm sorry, I'm gonna make you come up to the lectern just so we get the microphone picking that all up.
By the third word, I recognized my mistake. The space looks larger on screen than it is in life.
Okay.
It's just not that big a space. I don't think the turnaround pad is a good idea. Honestly, I think the 5-foot setback to get to the side of my garage would be a tough do because that driveway is so short. You put my car in that driveway, you got no room to do anything in front of the car or behind the car.
Would you, I know you said you wanted to replace the pad this year. Would it wait a little while and maybe if we change the ordinances, you could do it next year and
Well,
maybe the ordinance will change to
The
allow?
money's already in my bank account, so I'd have to pay the
Sure.
the credit union interest on it. But if you want to explore that, I can defer this for some period of time. You saw the concrete in the picture; it's ready to be replaced.
Yeah, I did. I agree with you. I'm just looking at options here, so we don't
Okay.
have to, we can fix this,
If-
or give us
if
some
there
time to
is-
fix this.
If there is a potential for the ordinance to be changed so that this is not an exception, I would be willing to explore that. I'd be willing to help write the darn ordinance.
I'll let the city attorney know. Thank you. All right. Comments? Commissioner Arnson?
While acknowledging changing the ordinance may be due and appropriate for some of these things, I guess my understanding of granting an exception is that the ordinance is pretty much good as is, but there are instances where it makes sense to do something else. And if a reasonable, logical explanation for granting the exception is given, then it may be preferable to grant the exception rather than change the ordinance. And again, in this case, I think there are numerous reasons, impervious area, encroaching on the neighbor's property, really kind of squaring off an existing area, that it makes sense to do it, and being an exception seems a reasonable way to do it.
Okay. Any other comments? Alderperson Kneebone.
Yeah, I've been looking at this too. I tend to agree with Commissioner Arnson. I think aesthetically, it's gonna look a lot worse to make that big flare to the east than it would be to square it off. So
The other option is the do nothing option and leave it as the footprint that it currently is
Well,
at.
so caution there, because the applicant would be allowed to, right now, add that flare to the east.
Right.
That is currently allowed, so by doing nothing, he still has that option.
I realize
Okay.
that.
I just want to be clear on that.
Mr. Mayor?
It is 6:30, by the way.
Oh, I'm sorry. We need to recess. I will reconvene now the City Plan Commission at 6:45. We're all on track. This is good. Reconvening the Plan Commission, we left off with discussion regarding a request from Carl Wires for a driveway exception to expand the driveway in front of his home at 933 Meadow Street, page 38 of your packet, Commissioners. Do we need a recap of the discussion that took place 15 minutes ago? No? Don't be doing that. Quirk is going to find out where you live and come after you.
What?
Moving the microphone. It makes noises on the microphone.
Noted.
Thank you. All right, no recap is necessary, is that correct?
Correct.
I kind of forgot where we were. We were talking about the space and changing the ordinances and the exceptions, and this was a good idea. Commissioner Arnson.
I'd make a motion to approve the exception request with the specifications as to why it's preferable than going with the established ordinance.
Okay, would you please recap those in, say, a paragraph, so someone can incorporate that into the motion as part of the record?
Well, primarily the lesser paved area and hence stormwater concerns, maintaining more unpaved or more permeable area, again helping with stormwater. And I would think the aesthetics of keeping it within the kind of frame of the house is preferable to stepping out. And if I was the neighbor, I would think I'd rather have the existing lawn than parking area. And so there are a number of reasons I think that make it preferable.
Thank you, that helps. Is that significant enough? Good. Is there a second?
A second.
Seconded by Commissioner Rice, microphone touching Rice. Any other comments?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
So just a comment on this and kind of walking through the whole thing. While I agree it's preferable to add less impervious surface on the lot, keep in mind the current owner or any future owners could still add to the right of the garage. There still is enough width to do it, so you could end up with both areas paved. I think the exception is there for rare instances, but to state that we're doing it just because it'll be less than the other option probably would not be, in my opinion, the correct way to go. I don't think the ordinance needs to be amended. I think we've gone through this enough where we've identified these situations. Not every property is going to be able to fit 2 cars on a lot. Luckily, this one can. I think one of the other options that should be considered is allowing overnight parking on the street, much easier than what we have it now.
Here, here.
And for the record, we're going to be talking about that next Monday
Oh.
at our committee meetings. So I'm of the mindset that if we think the ordinance doesn't adequately address the concerns, then we shouldn't, or we should change the ordinance rather than allowing the exceptions. If the exceptions are there, then perhaps we look at the ordinance and put that right in there. But that's my 2 cents.
I guess I kind of see the exception, and not like I know the guy or anything, I'm not trying to sell this, but just trying to make sense out of it, is I think the specific instances of this situation warrant the exception rather than the idea that we don't want to grant an exception, especially considering a potential worst-case scenario that, granted, you could have the additional pavement, but it seems like doing it this way avoids that eventuality.
Potentially, yes.
Potentially.
Maybe, I mean, I suppose we could go even one step further if that's what the wish of the commission and council were, is we we could go so far as to put some sort of deed restriction on there, preventing anyone from going east in the future, because it's going to be owned by someone else later. Commissioner Rice, you had some comments?
I guess just one additional comment related to setting a precedent. I think this situation is slightly nuanced in that just the setup of the house and the lot. There was reference earlier in the discussion about having driveway extend into the front yard. And this is arguably the side yard. It's a corner lot, side mount garage.
The address is actually on Meadow,
On
too.
Meadow, exactly. So I can understand concerns, and I live in Alder Dugan's district. I have seen properties where, the extension of driveways into the front of the house can be unsightly. I would argue that is not what's being proposed here. Again, a fairly unique situation on a unique lot and a unique house and garage setup. So I don't know that it would set a specific precedent that could be leveraged in the future.
Thank you. Any other comments from the commissioners? Final comments from the audience. We have a motion to approve with conditions, and the reasoning was outlined by Commissioner Arntzen. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I will stand opposed, along with Commissioner Haynes. That is still a majority. The motion is approved. And then that will go to council.
It does not go to
Oh, I'm sorry, it doesn't go to council. Hang on, wrong agenda. Item number 6 is a request from the YMCA for a sign variance to exceed the wall sign requirements for a wall sign at 1000 Division Street. Commissioners, page 48 of your packet. Kyle?
The YMCA, I'm sure we all know where it is. It's on Division Street, and they're requesting a wall sign on their east facade. A few years ago, probably 7 now, they requested a sign variance for the north side. The reason being is because they are zoned R5, which limits wall signage to 32 square feet. They are also limited a little bit more with regards to freestanding signage. And so staff, and if you read the staff report, understand why staff feels as though the site is certainly unique. A couple of reasons why. It's got access on 4 streets, or frontage on 4 streets. It's a very large facility. And so an R5 zoning classification and limiting that to 32 square feet can be somewhat burdensome given the community use of the YMCA. However, they do also have a freestanding sign on Division Street that does market the site. Here you can see the proposed location of the wall sign, again on that northeast facade facing Division. The primary reason why the YMCA is making the request is to become more visible to the university and the students on campus. Here's a rendering of the sign. And here are some photos of the sign location that were taken from the side street there. And it's of staff's belief that the YMCA is adequately marketed from that location, from the east, due to the existing freestanding sign. Therefore, we have not found a hardship when it comes to visibility and marketability of the sign or that facade, because there is an existing sign that does market the facility. Therefore, we do not feel as though the sign variance is warranted and would recommend denial of the sign variance.
Okay. Questions from the commissioners?
Just a quick comment. In the image that is showing where the sign would be on the facade there, it looks like maybe a spring picture. And anyway, on the other picture, there's some pretty large mature trees there that would arguably cover that signage. Would the approval of this require them to remove at least one of those trees?
I would assume that they would
Prune it.
potentially, yes, remove a tree in order to achieve the visibility that they request.
It wouldn't be required, however, as part of this.
Right, correct.
Okay, comments from the audience? Up to the lectern, please.
Good evening, Sharon Johnson, CEO with the Stevens Point Y. The address is 1000 Division Street. Thank you for the opportunity. I wanted to actually speak a little bit more to the hardship request, just to clarify that, I think, a little bit. We rely on a significant portion of the university students for employees. About 80% of our workforce comes from the university students. So obviously that's significant for us. And right now, just like I think we can speak for every business in our city, we're all struggling for employees. We all have open positions. We all have now hiring signs. And one of the most significant areas that we hire in is childcare. So we really rely on the university specific to those that are in the education department going to classes, because it's great work experience, resume experience for them, in order to have childcare experience in order to go into the elementary or education field into the future. So marketing to university students specific to the education department is really critical for us. Unfortunately, my daughter actually just graduated from UW-Stevens Point, and I knew there was a Y because I worked for one, but we felt there was really a lot of lack of marketing from the university side because you don't actually travel necessarily Division Street when you come into town to tour the university and then come to the university. So it's not something you see immediately when you come into town. And so our location of this sign, straight down Portage, would be visible then from the DUC, the Dreyfus University Center, for tours, as well as from the hub of the university there for people to see, oh, hey, the YMCA is not far. Granted, it would be great, obviously, for membership for us, but more significantly for us for employment opportunities then. We actually had to reduce our childcare numbers from 100 children to 80 because we just don't have enough staff in order to manage the requirement for licensing for ratios. So unfortunately, that puts us in another bind because we have about 60 families or 60 children on our waiting list to try to get into our childcare center, and we can't accommodate them because we just don't have enough staff in order to do that. So I just wanted to articulate a little bit on the hardship side of it and why we're trying to do that. The other thing I also wanted to mention is that this sign is completely flat. When you are on Division Street, you will never see it until you are right on top of it. It is truly directed straight down Portage Street. It won't be anything that would be obtrusive on the Division side or that you would even see. It was really more directly down Portage for the marketing to the university.
Director, can you answer the question regarding the tree? Is your intention to take a tree down or two?
I think we would prune it before taking it completely down. If we could look at that alternative option. If it did require that we had to take it down, we would do that. But my intention would be that we would prune it back first before taking it down.
Okay. Based on the angle on the top picture, the trunk seems to be right in that location. So it would seem logical that pruning it you'd have to prune it almost all the way back to
Sure.
the trunk. So the likelihood of you having to take out a tree seems higher. Would you agree or not?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think the trunk is as close as you think. I think that's a shadow in the
No,
picture.
I think that's a shadow.
Okay, maybe.
It's,
Okay. Yeah, maybe get away with that. Okay. Sorry, it is a shadow then.
No, that's okay.
Page 56 within your packet will
Yeah.
identify it.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other comments? Alder Jennings, then Alder Nabel.
Tori Jennings, Alder District 3. I feel sort of bad because I feel like I'm standing up here continuing to talk against community development. But Ms. Johnson came to me very early on in this planning process, and we had a long conversation about it. This is, again, another situation that I look at as unique. And the YMCA is the result of a really bad street, right? Division Street. It should front Division Street if we had a proper street. And this is what happens when buildings face the wrong way. So it's this big block, and it is hard to know what it is, particularly if you're not from this area. And if, to what was said about touring campus and touring the area, it's literally true that if a tour is being given, people don't go down Division Street because it's so ugly. That's a whole nother conversation, right? That we all know I want to have. So I guess I'm in favor of this, or at least like you to consider it. I am not, however, in favor of taking a tree down. That was never part of the discussion discussion we have, but I can understand the argument, so thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Alder Dable?
Sorry. I was not expecting at all to be up here. Cindy Nabel, District 3. This is right across from my district. And the people on Porter Street that live on, that would be seeing this blue light all night long, live in my district. And I would think, as you look at on page 59, and you're looking down from Porter Street, those houses that are there, they already now have a parking lot with lights that are there and snow removal going on and everything. Now they're going to have a bright sign that would be going right up there too. If it's on that corner, that would be, if you were living there, that's what you're going to see down there. No?
It's not going to be lit.
It's not going to be lit. Okay,
Nope.
so I didn't, sorry.
As the director said, it's just going to be a flat sign with probably like maybe an aluminum with vinyl overlay on it.
I was just thinking flat light sign makes a huge difference. No problem then. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a point of information, the YMCA many years ago did front Division Street. Probably the last remodel, I think, is where it switched the main entrance to that parking lot, but it used to face Division Street, and that was the address. Any other comments? Okay, commissioners, you've heard testimony. What are your wishes? Commissioner Cooper.
I will move to deny the request based on the staff findings.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Commissioner Haynes. Any further discussion?
I guess just some comments. Although I kind of agree that this single sign isn't necessarily going to cause a great deal of hardship to any of the neighbors. There is already a signage on Division Street, as Mr. Kearns has pointed out. And I can appreciate the difficulty that the YMCA is dealing with staffing. But I would argue that a single sign isn't necessarily going to provide all of the information that the YMCA is trying to communicate with prospective members or employees. So it is there's some marketing that needs to be done, but I don't know that this is necessarily would have solved their problem anyway, and agree with the rest of the commission here.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, the motion is to deny the request. All those in favor of denial signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No. Yes, I'm opposed.
Yes, you're opposed. We will note that Commissioner Arntzen is in opposition to the denial, but the denial stands by majority vote, so the request is denied. Item number 7 is a request from Jeff Vaughtner for approval to use a vacant lot for accessory uses where a principal residence does not exist at the unaddressed parcel bounded by Dixon Street, Center Street, Michigan Avenue, and Wellesby Avenue. Page 60 of your packet. And Kyle, can you talk to us about this one?
Yeah, this property is zoned R2. It's within an established neighborhood. It takes access off of an alley, so it does not front on a street. It's about 12,000 square feet, 121 by 100 feet wide. Any accessory use that's proposed or operated on a site where no principal use exists requires common council approval, meaning that if there's no home that is a principal use, they could not, do accessory uses like vehicle storage or, any other accessory uses. Couldn't construct a shed on the property because there is no primary use unless approved by common council. Hence the reason the request is before this body. Here is a map showing the site, again, with access off the alleyway. In terms of its history, I believe it was purchased on tax deed a few years ago. Prior to that, I believe it was owned by one of the neighbors in close proximity to the property. Here are some photos of the site. The applicant is requesting to install a gravel parking pad and to store some of his equipment, I believe a motor home there and potentially some other additional equipment. And the property doesn't have any utilities serving it and probably wouldn't, as they would have to come down the alley or they would have to go through an existing property, and easements would likely need to be granted for development of the site. We did receive one comment from a neighbor regarding some concerns they had regarding maintenance of the property and how the storage would be detrimental to those neighbors. And staff also has those similar concerns. In most cases, if you have a home, you're going to maintain that home, you're going to mow the lawn, you're going to ensure that, you know, it's well kept. If you do not have a home or a principal use on the property, it probably means you're not regularly there, and staff fears as though it may not be maintained as nice. And certainly the approval of storage could lead to additional items being stored there that could again be detrimental to the surrounding neighbors. So that's why we would recommend denial of the request for those reasons.
Okay, thank you. Comments from the commissioners?
I have
Commissioner
a
Haynes?
couple questions. Do you have any reason why this became a separate parcel? Because it looks like all the other addresses along there all have, you know, very long.
So I did do some research in the assessor's office, and the records that I found indicate it was a lot for some time.
Okay.
So it wasn't just recently split off.
Yeah.
But you would be led to think that, because it does have a jog near the alley as well, almost as if
Right.
they were planning for the extension of a road. You know, I obviously didn't do a title search or anything, but something like that may reveal how the property has been transferred over time.
And my second question is, in order to have an accessory use on this property, don't you need to have a principal use?
You do, correct. However,
So they're missing a principal use.
correct. However, the code does state that accessory uses can be approved by the Common Council in the event that there is no principal use.
And that is one of the reasons staff, I believe, is recommending denial, is because there isn't a primary
Right.
use, as
Yeah.
well as the adverse effect that it could have on surrounding properties.
Right.
And oftentimes we see that where the owner owns a property across the street, they put up a garage because they live across the street. We saw that a little earlier, I think last year with the Maliks, when we annexed property in from the town of Hall. They were within the neighborhood. You just run into issues when you have accessory uses on a property. They typically aren't maintained as well because you're not going to that property every day. And so certain things tend to happen, which causes issues in the neighborhood, and then becomes an enforcement issue later on.
Kyle, our director, the pictures on page 62, when were those taken? Do we know?
Those were taken, I believe, last week.
Okay. It just appears to me that it hasn't been very well maintained to begin with.
Green.
Just kind of growing. Commissioners, any other questions? Alderperson Kneebone.
Kind of seems to me if the person doesn't live there, they want to put an RV or a camper or something, it could become an attractive nuisance for somebody that might be looking to squat. If they're not coming and checking on an RV, somebody could break in. I mean, which would concern me if I was a neighbor, so, I would,
Okay.
yeah, I'm not sure that, I would want that in my next door if I lived in that neighborhood.
Okay. Comments from the audience? We'll go with President Johnson and then Mr. Vonner.
Melissa Johnson, District 5. This is in my district, contrary to what's posted on the side of the thing. It says District 4, so I was going to force Alder Zarazua up here and make her do this, but, so anyway, I guess I have a number of comments, and I had talked with Mr. Vauder, I don't know, a couple weeks ago. And I had asked our community development coordinator about the grass growing. As you say, it looks like it hasn't been maintained, and this is an undeveloped lot, and what I was told, there's not a requirement to maintain an undeveloped lot. Mr. Vaughter had told me that he did a number of things, tried to plant more trees and do a number of things. So I think, and if you look at some of the other properties along there, they probably aren't as well maintained on that back alley as well, because I rode down on my bicycle just to take a look at it. And they're back, it's all the way to the back, and the front of the properties are fine. But anyway, as I was looking at, and I guess I need this clarification, Chapter 14, point I, point 3, point B, point III, this is on parking, and in residential areas, in this area, this property, this parcel is zoned R2, and it says recreational vehicles, RVs, in parentheses, associated with or customary to residential uses may be parked as a vehicle but shall not be utilized for storage of goods, materials, or equipment other than is considered part of the RV or essential to its function. So I think we have some conflicts because this is clearly saying it could be parked there because it's R2.
Well, on a residential property, and I think that's where the clarification comes in, it's zoned residential.
It's zoned
However, it is
residential.
not residential.
But
No one lives there.
no one lives there.
And maybe that's just a word that would needs to be clarified in the ordinance.
Clearly, yes, because this doesn't say that. So I guess that was my concern is that this is, and I believe it once was owned by the city of Stevens Point, that lot. Yeah. So Mr. Vaughter, I believe, bought it from the city. So is that correct? Yeah, if I remember correctly.
From the city doesn't take tax deeds.
It could have been, maybe it was the
County
county.
does that. County
So-
does that, yeah.
But anyway, I think he's tried to do a number of things to improve the property. I think scaling back on the, or doing some mowing along the alley would be appropriate. But I was confused by the property, or this rendering in ordinance as it relates to parking and recreational vehicles. So, there you go. That's all.
Thank you very much.
President Johnson, could you repeat the ordinance?
Chapter 14.
Section 14?
Section 14. Thank you. I was in a hurry.
No, 14 what?
14.I.3.B.II. And it's the parking, I think this is in the zoning code.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments? Mr. Vaughter?
Jeff Vaughter, 418 Cedar Street in the village of Whiting. Whiting resident, Stevens Point taxpayer.
Not 408 Cedar Street,
A couple of
418.
Yes. A couple of comments. Could you put that picture of the aerial photograph of the area up there, if you could? That one. Behind this white piece here, this used to extend, the lot did all the way out to Wellesby Avenue. And this was sold off at one point. The story I got was that there was an interest in running utilities up here, buying this lot, this half lot, this half lot, that half lot, and a number of half lots there. Because if you can take a look at this picture, you see there's a big blank there that plenty of residents could be built in there. All you really have to do is run utilities up there, and you'd also have to get the neighbors to agree to sell off half their lot, which if.
Jeff, I would ask that you come a little closer to the microphone. I know it's awkward because you want to point things out on there, but as soon as you step away from the microphone, it doesn't pick up as well.
All of these lots, or these inner lots, would have to be purchased, utilities would have to be run up there, and it could be developed. Now, if the city was to cover first of all, if this was to be able to be bought out and the city ran utilities up there, they would likely be able to regain any loss or any cost of the utilities through increased taxes. You could probably get, I'm guessing, maybe 6 residences in there. If you ran utilities in there, you'd probably make up the cost in a year in taxes if it was developed. But you'd still have to get the neighbors to agree to sell it. But that's just some background information on why that lot became isolated. It's not like the Y that has frontage on 4 streets. This is extremely unique in Stevens Point in that it has no access on any street, just a back alley. I don't think there's a possibility of a precedence being made here in that this is such a unique situation. There are very few lots, I would render to guess, in the city of Stevens Point that have no access, no address, no street frontage. This lot does. Why did I buy it? That's a good question. We'll go there some other day. As far as maintenance is concerned, Alder Johnson pointed out that we did maintain that property for a number of years. We were over there mowing it regularly. And we also planted numerous trees around the perimeter. Now, the south boundary that's mostly lilac bushes, and it's not very visible from those residences. So there is kind of a visual barrier there. There's a correction on some of the information you have, and it is that we propose putting a 20 by 20 gravel pad in on this site so that we could park a vehicle or two there. We proposed the southwest corner, and that would be by those lilac bushes where the screening is most prominent to any outside or perimeter residences. If you take a look at it again, I'll go point out that corner is approximately where we wish to park two vehicles. And that's pretty doggone far from any residence. If you look at that map, I don't know, at least 100, 150, maybe 200 feet from any residence, and highly invisible because of those lilac bushes. We did make the proposal for a 20 by 20 inch pad here of gravel. Why gravel? Well, it can be removed if there's a problem with it being there in the future, which I can't foresee. We also stipulated that there'd be a 20 by 20 inch pad here, only to delineate that we do not intend to make this into any kind of a parking area or junk collection site or anything. We would be limited to two vehicles, probably maximally, because the size of the pad would be 20 by 20. And I believe ordinances say that you cannot park a vehicle on the grass. It has to be on a hard surface. That's the reason that we would put that in there. Again, it would be gravel. We could remove it if we had to. And if the neighbors, or I understand we have one objection, and this was what Mr. Kearns also referred to, that this could become a collection site, an eyesore. It won't be. Our current plans are to park one mobile home there, and that is my son's mobile home. He lives with us right now, but he is actively pursuing buying a place of his own. At that point, that vehicle, the mobile home, would be gone. We'd move it to the site that he purchased. So this is just, I hope, a temporary fix until he finds his home.
Mr. Vaughter, it's a mobile home, not a motor home?
It is a motor home.
Motor home, okay.
Yes.
Because that actually makes a difference.
Yeah, I misspoke. Yeah, it's got a motor, you can drive it around.
Right.
So,
and that therein lies the difference.
Yes. The size of the pad, just for reference, a 20 by 20 inch pad would be less than 1/30th the size of the whole lot. So we're not talking a big development here or anything. We're simply looking at some place that we can park some vehicles that we need your okay to do in a pinch. Now, the reason we like to get this out from where it's parked at my place right now is that we were getting a lot of snow in the winter times, and we are looking for a place to put snow. And if we can get this out of the way, we've got quite a bit of area we can put more snow in. It's climate change, I believe. Okay.
That was sarcasm, by the way.
So I guess in addressing any objection that we've heard, and I guess there was one objection to this, and that is that this would become a collection point. No, it's going to be guaranteed. I will give you my word that there will be no more than two vehicles parked there, or one vehicle and maybe a trailer. That is our plans right now, one vehicle and a trailer, if you okay this. But you have my guarantee. That's the biggest it will be. 20 by 20 inch pad is the biggest it will be. The only exception would be is if the city ever did run a TIF district down this alley, bring in utilities and build six, or allow the building of 6 residences there and recoup your costs through taxes, that would be the exception. Then, of course, probably a garage would be put on there. But until then, what we plan on doing is letting it sit the way it is, okay? And I guess it's speculation. But what I also would like to do, and we have tried to, as Alder Johnson has pointed out, we have tried to plant trees around the perimeter of this. And because there is no utilities here, no water, no light, no electricity, no sewer, we could not keep the trees that we had planted there alive. They all died. Like, I think we have, out of about 80 trees we've planted there so far, one is still alive, and that's just because we don't have water on site. For a while there, I was trucking in water there to keep the plants alive, but that didn't work either. It's just too dry. So the reason the site looks the way it does in the recent photo, this photo you see taken there, well, I don't know when that was taken, but that's before we allowed the grass to grow. We used to keep it mowed, but we decided to let it go to grass to try and increase the water retention of the lot. If it can retain water, we can grow trees. If we can grow trees, we can make the lot look better. And I do believe Stevens Point is a tree city. Okay? So if you have any other questions before I say.
I do.
Yes.
So a couple of things, Mr. Vaughter. You and I have known each other for a very long time, probably longer than I can remember. And I know you to be a man of your word. However, giving your word doesn't exactly fall into the realm of ordinances and things like that. The question that I have for you is there a reason that you cannot use a storage unit like anybody else would have to use if they have too many items for their property?
Well, I would say that we did take a property that was producing no tax revenue whatsoever to the city, and we put it back on the tax roll. And we did it almost cost-free to the city. All we're really asking is, can we get some use out of this property? Now, my point is, yes, there's probably a lot of places you could rent to store a motor home in, okay? But they'd run about $150 a month, okay? So it is a matter of financial. Can we use a property that we own and save the money of having to rent a place for this? Does that answer your question?
That does answer my question. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Any other questions for the applicant, as long as he's up here? Alder Kneebone.
Yes.
Would you have any concern over security? That motorhome is going to be parked there with nobody in it? Are you concerned anybody be messing with it or breaking into it, or?
That's a possibility.
Now that everybody knows where it might be.
No,
Just
I mean,
saying.
that would be my concern as a neighbor, that it might.
But if it
somebody
did, we'd either
might-
repair it or remove it. I mean, if it was damaged to the point where it was no longer usable or salvageable as a vehicle, we'd remove it. So, but that would be our liability. We'd be taking that on. It's not the city's problem.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you. Maybe we'll call you back up later if we need it. Thank you. Alder Nabel.
I might have missed this. Cindy Nabel, District 3. Did you say that you live right next to this property?
No, he lives 418 Cedar Street.
Okay, so it's a
Whiting.
distance. So,
Resident, Stevens Point taxpayer.
Kind of brought that up when.
Sorry, that's a Reed Rochellow
No, thank
reference.
you. I know Alder Kneebone made a good point. We have a lot of problems right now with transient issues with drugs in lots of towns, but Stevens Point does too. And that would be a concern, people squatting. And there has been those situations in Stevens Point, and that can become a problem. That'd be the only concern I would have. I totally understand where you're coming from. You have a property, you bought it, you pay taxes on it. Why can't I use this? And it makes so much sense to me too. And yet, this is just what I've learned now, being an alder. Sometimes just because I think it makes sense doesn't mean that it's really what is best, always. And so many further to go. So that would be the only concern I could think of that we'd have to really look at. But, I would want to be able to say yes to you. So, thank you.
Any other comments? Yes, ma'am. Yes, we need you up at the lectern so the microphone picks it up. Name and address, please.
Mary Marco, 2416 Dixon Street.
I live in the house on the corner, right by the alley, that looks right into the backyard of that property. It's very visible. The alley is sand. It is not even gravelled. It washes out and plugs the sewer at the end of the alley, exactly at the end of the alley, plugging it and causing floods every time it rains heavily. There's probably one there right now. This was repossessed. The house in front of it and the back was repossessed. And to make money from it, they subdivided it in half. This is the history. And sold that part to this gentleman. And so that's, the bank wanted to have some money, so that's what they did. And he bought it very cheap. He tried to maintain it at first for a short time. He did plant some pine trees. There is one living. Those other trees that you see on that one picture, they're locust. With the pickers, they come up automatically. They're a nuisance, and they spread everywhere. As for lilac bushes, there are some, but they're very thin. There is a residence that backs it that just got purchased right on the east side of the alley. They have a very small child who will be playing in the backyard. This is right next to it. Also, there's people that live next door to that their property abuts right up to that piece of property. And I know they don't like it either, that it's going to be parked with trailers there. It isn't guarded, it isn't lighted, it has no water, no electricity, nothing. None of those do, except one where the man did build a garage to store an antique car. It faces the alley farther down, but that's the only one on the whole alley. And I don't believe the neighbors are in favor of selling their lots, because as you look out, that is like a big park. There are squirrels and animals that come there, and it's desirable to keep that. So I'm totally against it. It would be terrible to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Carol Hetzel, and I live at 205 Dixon Street. Those are my lilacs, by the way, in the back there. Our property butts right up against that. And it's like she says, I agree with her. The people who live there, we like it the way it is. We don't want streets. We don't want to pack houses in there. Somebody's always trying to buy that, hoping that they're going to put a street so they can sell it off and get rich. Well, he doesn't even live here. He lives in Whiting. But for us, that's a nice, leave it the way it is. It's quiet. It's peaceful, the way we like it. We've got enough going by the front. We've got trucks. We've got Stachinsky. We got the bowling alley. We got vandalism out there, people throwing beer bottles, things like that. We got enough already. And where it is in the back there, there's no street lights or anything. It's pitch black there at night. You can't see a thing. Anything parked there is likely to get vandalized. And something like a motorhome, that's going to be just like, something just asking to be vandalized. There's kids hanging around. They're going to break into that. Who knows? They're going to be having parties in there. Who'd know? You couldn't see it back there, but you're going to have an element there and probably have more crime. So I'm against it.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? No more comments? Okay, we'll bring it back to the commissioners. Commissioners, thoughts?
I guess I just would want to follow up from President Johnson's comment about that. Were we able to find any specific verbiage about in the zoning code, and can we get some clarification on that?
Sure.
Yeah, the section that was referenced is actually only pertaining to driveways for residential uses. So it would be my determination that this would not apply because there is not a residential use on the property.
Sure. Okay. And I could speak from a little bit of history, being on council since 2004. I know we've had other applicants request similar things. And that's part of the reason that we have that ordinance requiring a primary use before you put up accessory structures. When I was at county board, one of the pieces that we took was on Division Street, near Whiting Avenue. You still see it, it's a vacant lot right now, because there was a house there that was tore down. It got, yes, I'll read that into the record. It got tore down, got accepted through tax deed, but nobody could put a garage on there, so it's sitting vacant. We've had several requests come up for those types of uses. Heck, I could use a garage somewhere too, with all the things I got, but I make do. I during the winter, I store things, pay for it. So, and I know that one of the things that the council had spoken about collectively, the council, is that overuse of parking and people having too many vehicles. That has been a concern. So, because this is currently against the ordinances, and if we disagree with the ordinances, we should change that to allow parking on a vacant lot without a primary use. Because it is currently conflicting with the current ordinance, I'm going to move to deny the request to put up this parking area. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Haynes. Any further discussion? I have to read this into the, oh, yes, this is right, thank you. This is from Ellie Fritsch, 2125 Michigan Avenue. Good morning, Kyle. Thank you for taking the time yesterday to meet with me regarding the request to use above parcel for storage of an RV, and the parcel is outlined in the subject line. I myself am concerned about this request. The property owner already does not take care of this property as the grass has not been cut for some time already. It is very overgrown. Now add a vehicle trailer or RV to it with the long grass and now places for rodents to live and hide under stored vehicles. The property would not only look like a junkyard, but also invite rodents into our area. I live on Michigan Avenue, and as we all know, it is a very busy street. But what made me decide to buy my house was that large backyard and nice alley we all have now. Many people walk through the alley rather than the noisy Michigan Avenue. Who would want to buy my home if the property across the alley looks like a junkyard? With the owner not actually living on this property, who knows when he would check on it and clean it up? Why would you allow that to happen? There are many storage units in the area that he can use rather than letting them sit on an empty lot. Please do not let him store items on this lots. It will only hurt our nice alley and our property value. Again, that was email from Ellie Frisch, who asked that this be read into the record. We have a motion and a second to deny the request. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of denial signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the denial is approved. Item number 8 is a public hearing and subsequent action on a request from Meyer Stores Limited Partnership for a conditional use permit to install 2 off-premise freestanding signs on adjacent property to the proposed Meyer store location located at 5640 Carrie Frost Drive, page 66 of your packet, Commissioners. Kyle.
So you pretty much summed up the request. Meyer's locating off of Carrie Frost Drive, which is northeast of the corner of Brulowski Road and County Highway HH, kitty corner from Crossroads Commons in Plover. They are requesting off-premise signage primarily because their existing frontage is off Carrie Frost, which is more of a collector road and not necessarily a main arterial street. So they certainly need that visibility. The property is zoned B4 Commercial District, and the B4 Commercial District limits freestanding signs to 20 feet in height and 150 square feet in area. If you are within a quarter mile of the property, you can request a off-premise sign. The locations they are requesting are about 1,000 feet away from the front of the store, so they certainly meet the quarter-mile requirement. However, as you'll see here, they do not meet the size requirement for off-premise signs. They again are requesting 2 signs. The location on the corner shown on the map, corner of Brolowski and County Highway HH, is where a very large freestanding sign is proposed, and I'll get into the specifics shortly, which do change a little bit from the items that were included in the packet. And the second sign is located at the corner of County Highway HH and Cary Frost, and is more of a monument sign that does meet the sign requirements for monument signs. So here is the drawings for the signs. The monument sign is the lower right-hand corner of that drawing. And in front of you, you'll have a new drawing of the new proposed sign. Originally, Meyer was only going to construct a sign for themselves as well as tenants that locate within Meyer stores. Typically, Meyers will have 2 to 3 different tenants within the store, whether it's, a sub shop or some other restaurant or a hair cutter. However, they now have designed the sign to actually accommodate several outlots that may be constructed near these signs. So as you can see on the south side of Cary Frost, the south and east side, there's some vacant land. Their intent is to parcelize those properties and create anywhere from 5 to 7 outlots. And then those outlots would be allowed space on this sign, again, on the corner of Brolowski and County Highway HH. This sign, however, is 40 feet tall and is also, I believe now, near 300 square feet in size. So it does also require a sign variance, which will be requested later on in the agenda. Again, this is that updated sign, and the design is in front of you. In terms of the review, if some of you can remember that have been on the commission for a long time, COPS was a very similar situation on Main Street, where they took access off of Pinecrest, I believe. However, Pinecrest doesn't serve as a major arterial, and they requested a off-premise sign onto Main Street, which currently exists. And in that case, it was approved. This is, again, a very similar situation where, the intent of the B4 district is to, allow for signs such as this or businesses such as this to market on major arterials. So we certainly think it's fitting. We don't feel as though it would be a detriment to the public or the neighbors. We also feel as though, from an aesthetic standpoint, it's going to improve that corridor where you have one sign, one larger sign that is marketing several potential businesses and lots versus having several different signs for all of those different outlots that could potentially create an over-prolific amount of signage on that corner. So for those reasons, we would recommend approval of the conditional use permit for the off-premise signs as proposed, with a few of these conditions, one of which we have added, because if you can remember, the original request or the original recommendation from staff in the report was to deny, but again, we feel as though now that it is incorporating those outlots and those different potential businesses in the future, that it is more appropriate to recommend the approval of the sign, as I think it certainly diminishes or improves the aesthetic of that corner. But the condition that we would recommend adding then is that a deed restriction be placed on each of those outlots prohibiting signage fronting on Brolowski Road and County Highway HH. However, signage would still be permitted for those outlots on Cary Frost per the sign ordinance.
Thank you. Any clarifying questions before I open the public hearing?
So when we get to a vote, we're voting on the location of these signs. That's really what we're voting.
Right now,
Yes, but go ahead.
So right now, this item would be to allow the conditional use permit for those off-premise signs.
Right, the location.
Yes.
I will note, however, that the the standards of review for the conditional use permit do take into consideration the design and the specifics of the sign. So we essentially have two requests that are hand in hand. They will still need a
Right.
sign variance.
This next one is the sign variance for the size.
Right, but essentially, when you're approving the conditional use, you're also approving somewhat the design, because the standards of review for the conditional use permit take into consideration the design of the sign, the location of the sign.
But not the
so
size
forth.
of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you could.
It does as well.
You could consider the size under the conditional use. You can also consider it under the variance, which is the next two items.
Well, right,
They are
we
not
have
mutually
other
exclusive.
items.
However, it seems logical that if you approve the conditional use, you are also okay with the variance in the size. Otherwise, you would also have that same concern, size concern, on the conditional use. Does that make sense?
Well, no, because as I look at the staff report, it seems like they are, well, I don't know, what is the staff recommendation? Approving the conditional use permit, but on
Mhm.
the next one, it says to deny the sign variance. So there are two different things, so they are
Because
not
it's
the
not
same.
the current agenda item, but I'm going to allow that discussion because they all kind of tie into the same thing, and it's very difficult.
So if you
discern
read into the staff report, we were recommending for the conditional use to approve, again, yes, the locations or a freestanding sign that met the sign code.
Right? Okay.
Unless a sign variance
we're
was,
voting on.
yes, unless a sign variance was
Okay.
granted separately.
Yeah.
However, now as they have changed the design of the sign to incorporate future tenants of those outlots, we would recommend to approve via the conditional use permit process, the locations, the size, and the design, so not necessarily restrict it to meeting the sign code.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but your recommendation, staff's recommendation on upcoming items would also change?
Correct. And we will be,
I think that's
we
the
will
bottom
be,
line
yeah,
that
we
you were
will be
getting at,
noting
right?
that in the future presentation.
But we hadn't talked about those items, so that didn't
I know, I'm
come
just
to
wondering if
light,
we
really.
can we talk about all of these together? It just gets a little
I would
bit
defer to the
confusing.
city attorney. I think it's probably okay because they're
I
the
don't
next three items, but I
Right.
would have to defer to the city attorney because conditional uses are a little bit different than variances. And I don't know if Logan is still around. Logan, if you were in the overflow room or outside, I could use your advice.
I would say yes, because there are elements within the conditional use that may impact the location. You may choose to say, we will allow an off-premise sign that is smaller than what the ordinance
Right.
allows.
And I would concur
don't
with
wanna
that, but I
say-
want to
I
make,
don't want to approve this one if it automatically approves these
I'd like to
others.
hear it from the city attorney. Attorney, the question is, well, the next three items are all very much related. Is it okay to talk about all three of those items collectively and still vote separately?
Sure, I don't think there's any problem with incorporating them into the discussion.
Thank you.
But I would advise against, making approval of one conditional upon approval of the other, or anything along those lines.
Understood. Thank you. Just wanted to hear it right from the attorney.
Yes.
So, Commissioner Haynes, do you have further questions, or should we have Kyle talk about the next two items and their change in recommendation?
Yes, I would like the conversation.
Kyle,
to
please address the
carry
change in
on.
recommendation one more time. I know you touched on it a little bit, but let's clarify
So-
that a little.
So again, the change in recommendation is twofold. Originally in the staff report, we were recommending approval of the conditional use permit, but noted that the approval would be for a freestanding sign that met the sign code.
Right.
However, we did add the condition that a sign variance, if this body approved those locations and approved the sign variance, that, it would subsequently, the
Supersede.
conditional, yeah, the approval of the sign variance would, yes, supersede the conditional use permit, and they would be allowed to exceed the height and the size as previously requested. Now, with the new design, incorporating a larger sign at the same height,
This
but
new
with
one.
multiple tenants, right? So essentially, they've added several panels to incorporate the 5 to 7 additional tenants that will be hopefully locating on those outlots in the future. We are recommending approval both for the design within the conditional use permit, but also the sign variance for the freestanding sign to exceed the height and the size of the new design proposal. And I won't touch upon the wall signs because I don't want to confuse it anymore, and I'll leave the wall sign
That makes
discussion for
So what is
the last
the
item.
allowed permitted height?
Permitted height for a freestanding sign is 150, but I believe off-premise signs are limited to 100. So it would be, because it's an off-premise sign, it would be limited to 100.
And the request is what?
100 feet?
Square
Or 100 square feet in size.
Right,
What
no,
height?
I'm talking about
20,
height.
20 feet in height.
20 feet.
In height is the maximum.
Okay, so they want to double 40 feet. Wow, okay.
Okay, Commissioner Arnson?
It's not clear to me why essentially the same size sign adding more square footage is acceptable when the previous one it was unacceptable, unless there's some contingency in there that the additional signage would limit signs elsewhere.
There is, and I'm going to have Kyle go back to the conditions. We add this bottom one in red,
Right. I
and
saw
that talks about the deed restriction shall exist for each outlot created prohibiting signage fronting that road. So you're taking the possibility of multiple signs on that location at a variety of parcels, consolidating them into one that exceeds our current standard, but the condition would exist then for everything else that they would not be allowed to have those additional signs. So you're saving the additional signs by putting them all in one and allowing, if approved, allowing exceeding our current standards by consolidation.
So to put things in a little bit better perspective, if you have 7 outlots, each of those outlots, if they have enough frontage, could have a freestanding sign of up to 100, maybe even 150 square feet, which would put a total square footage of signage on that corner at over 1,000, versus one sign at 300 square feet that would advertise for all of those outlots. So from an aesthetic standpoint, I think there's value there, but I also think there's value from a safety standpoint in that that's probably going to be a main thoroughfare in the future as East Park Commerce Center builds out. And I would certainly be in favor of limiting the amount of signage there to limit the amount of accidents that could potentially occur if somebody misses a driveway or has to quickly change lanes. So I think, again, the height is valuable in that case, and that's why, we've changed our recommendation.
Okay. All right. So we're getting into the debate of the merits of it, so I want to open up the public hearing and get through that before we talk about it any further, because I've got some points that I want to bring up. So I'm going to declare the public hearing open. Anyone wishing to offer testimony on this request, step forward, name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is John Konopacki, and I live in the property right behind it. The only question I have is, which way will that sign be facing? Is it going to be east-west or north-south?
Or potentially diagonally, I suppose.
I believe it would be facing east-west, but the applicant is here and they can confirm that. One of the other conditions, since we're talking about it, for the sign variance is that, given you're a resident nearby, is that we would want to limit the illumination of the sign just to the letters. So it wouldn't be a bright white backing that would illuminate the night. It would just be the letters that would be illuminated. So it would hopefully, reduce the amount of light intrusion to neighboring properties.
Right. Yeah, because that's what we're worried about is light pollution. We've got the store there right now. It's not too bad. In the summertime, you don't see it, but in the wintertime, it lights up our whole bedroom. And add more lighting there, I mean, we might as well go to a different bedroom.
I know a guy selling a lot.
So that's my only question.
Thank you. Public hearing's still open. Public hearing remains open. For the third time, the public hearing is open. Okay, seeing no one else wishing to speak, I'm going to declare the public hearing closed, bring it back to the commissioners. A point I wanted to make, it occurred to me that this isn't dissimilar to an earlier request that we had this evening about the driveway. Adding that extra spot as opposed to allowing what is already allowed and having that additional area. Currently, as Kyle mentioned, those outlots could each have a sign up to 100, potentially 150 square feet in each of those. Rather than having all of those signs and the potential, as Kyle said, of 1,000 square feet of signs, we're consolidating this, taking something that is an exception to our existing rules, but making it less intrusive by doing so. Putting all of those signs on one, it's larger than we would normally allow for any one particular property, but we're consolidating the resources of those potential 7 properties. So that would be my analogy, if that counts as an analogy. Okay, commissioners, any other questions, comments?
Yeah.
Alder Nebo?
Just based on what that says, deed restriction shall exist, signage shall be permitted for frontage on Carrie Frost Drive. So you've got a 40-foot sign with everybody here, a 40-foot sign with everybody here, and if they front on Carrie Frost, they can have signs as well.
Yes, it wouldn't prohibit that.
So there's only one
So
40,
you could still have all those signs.
I think it's this side.
there's only one sign that will be 40 feet. The sign on the east side of the map on the screen
Okay.
is going to be a
Location
monument
A5.
sign.
Oh, okay. I
That
thought
is much smaller. If you look,
They were changing to put a big one here and a big one here. Okay.
And she's referencing
gotcha.
on our map, location A5
Yeah.
as opposed to B6.
So that
B6
will
is on the
just,
corner
Gotcha.
of
So
HH and
we're
Burlesky.
looking at this one.
A5 is at Carrie Frost and Double H.
So we're looking at this
Yes,
picture that we have. Now, isn't there one kitty corner for Crossroads Commons on that same intersection?
There is.
That's
They do.
about the same size as well?
I don't know the specifics of the sign, but I would guess that it is very similar, correct?
So it kind of, it actually fits with what's already out there.
The other
Maybe a
th-
little taller, but
The other thing I want to note is that the sign code does permit a second freestanding sign if you have 300 feet of frontage or 500 feet of combined frontage. So if you're an outlot, you've got, frontage on both either potentially Burlowski Road and/or County Highway HH, as well as Carrie Frost. So I would bet that several of these outlots would potentially be permitted under the sign code right now to have a second freestanding sign. If you do have a second freestanding sign, it does have to be limited to 16 feet in height and 100 square feet in area. So with regards to the comment in the added condition, if an outlot had that frontage and wanted to pursue a second sign, it would have to be 16 feet in height and no more than 100 square feet in area to meet the sign code requirements.
So just 2 little questions.
Sure.
Is between the columns, is that, you can see through it? I'm just wondering, or is it a solid wall
what she's saying is,
on this?
in
right
this
here?
picture, this area under the gray bar, is that open and through it? I believe it is.
I believe it is open, yes.
That's something that the applicant can, she's nodding her head, yes.
Yeah, okay. And then I'm just wondering, is there landscaping around the base? I'm just curious.
They have not proposed it as such, but it certainly could be something that the commission could add if they see fit.
good idea.
Okay. Any further thoughts? Any comments from the applicant? You can make a comment, you don't have to. I don't want to put pressure on anybody.
I'm Ashley Mack, and I am a representative of Meyer. First and foremost, thank you for your time and consideration. We really appreciate it. We understand we're asking for a very large sign here. Our goal is here to drive more retail and more tax revenue and more businesses for the city of Stevens Point. But as you know, we're having to drive people off the interstate and past the existing shopping center in Clover. So that's why we find this sign so critical for our business and to hopefully develop this property as a whole.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I sense there may be some confusion, so what I'm going to do is I am going to move approval of the conditional use permit to install 2 off-premise freestanding signs on an adjacent property to the proposed Meyer store location at 5640 Carrie Frost Drive, with the addition of the staff recommendations and the deed restriction as outlined in the amended recommendation. Do we have a second?
Can I amend your?
You most certainly can. So why don't you offer your suggestion, and we can maybe get around an amendment?
It's the landscaping. I would just like to
With
see
a requirement of
appropriate
landscaping suitable to staff approval.
Yeah,
And I will add that to the original motion, so we don't need to amend,
okay.
because we hadn't
Thank
had a
you.
second yet. So, do I need to restate the motion before someone seconds, or are we good?
I'll second.
Seconded by Commissioner Cooper. Does any commissioner need me to restate the motion? Okay. All those in favor of the motion as presented signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that is approved. Item number 9 is a request from the Meyer Stores Limited Partnership for a sign variance to exceed the freestanding sign height and size requirements for an off-premise signage adjacent to the proposed Meyer store location at 5640 Carrie Frost Drive. Kyle, I understand staff recommendation has changed.
Right, so again, this is another one where we, for the reasons previously stated, we are now recommending approval of the sign. You should at this point be quite familiar with the sign details. This first variance request is just for the freestanding sign that we've discussed the last several minutes. Again, this is the updated design that you've seen and you have in front of you, 40 feet, 299 square feet. And it is going to be a sign that is going to advertise and market for the future outlots. Not only Myers and Myers tenants, but the future outlots that are created. So again, for the reasons previously stated, I won't go through them unless requested. We would recommend approval of the request. So it, again, this entirely changes from our recommendation in the staff report, and we have added the following conditions. Again, one being the deed restriction, the other being that the background of the sign shall be opaque, where only the lettering is illuminated, and that would be for every tenant as well, not only the Meyer portion, but every panel for every future tenant would have to only have the letters and or logo illuminated, and we can certainly clarify that if you would like.
So you're referring to these panels?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And again, I think we can certainly, just to make it consistent, add as well the landscaping around the sign base.
I would concur. Since there is no public hearing, I'm going to offer comments from anyone in the audience at this point. Seeing none, I'm going to bring it back to the commission. And in the interest of brevity, I will move approval with the amended staff recommendations, also including the requirement of landscape, subject to staff approval. Seconded by Alderperson Kneebone. Any discussion there? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that is approved. Item number 10 is a request from Meyer Stores Limited Partnership for a sign variance to exceed the wall sign size requirements for signage at the proposed Meyer store location, 5640 Carrie Frost Drive. Page 75 of your packets. Kyle?
So this was included in the staff report for the previous item. I thought it fitting just to have both sign variances under one staff report. In summary, however, again, it can be somewhat confusing. If you want me to clarify while I'm describing it, certainly speak up and let me know. Essentially, 10 wall signs are being proposed on the building, and they total 1,376 square feet. A maximum of 500 square feet of wall signage is permitted under the sign code. However, I also want to note that a few of the signs would be considered informational in nature. They are potentially the pharmacy drive-up, the welcome, and potentially the home and fresh. However, the home and fresh do signify the different sides of the building. So they, they're borderline, I think, informational. Whereas the Meyer signs, as you see here, are certainly advertising the location of the store and the store name and logo. So here you see a very large Meyer sign on the south side. There's also a Meyer sign proposed on the west facade that's not quite as large. And then the home and fresh signs are located above each entryway to the building. And then the smaller signs, the welcome sign, the pharmacy sign, are located at appropriate locations throughout the building. These are the details of the signs. In review, the building is quite large. It's about 500 feet from Carrie Frost Drive, about 200, or to the south, about 200 feet from the west. So it also has a very large setback from the right-of-way. Again, I mentioned the building's large. It measures about 356 feet in length on the west facade and 440 feet in length along the south facade. And it has about 1,500 feet of frontage along Carrie Frost Drive. The building has been placed in that location due to several reasons. In most cases with large retail parkings up front, loadings in the back. There's also stormwater on site that's addressed, so that was determined by Meyer to be the best location of the building. For those reasons previously mentioned, we do feel as though there is a practical difficulty when trying to meet the sign code, because I feel as though if they were to only utilize 500 feet of frontage, that they would be, it would be very difficult to do so given those setbacks. Given the building size, I think the building would certainly drown out the signage and could certainly cause confusion to patrons looking for the location. Also, they, as mentioned previously, have a few tenants that they lease to within the facility, and they are looking for signage as well. So in a way, this building does somewhat operate as a shopping center, which is permitted about 100 square feet of wall signage per tenant in a shopping center. This would be something along the lines of where Harbor Freight's located on Highway 10. So again, staff would recommend approval for those reasons. We feel as though the ratios are appropriate for the buildings, the setbacks. We don't feel as though they will be a detriment to the surrounding property, and we would recommend approval with the conditions outlined.
So one question, are these illuminated or are they just plastic flat?
So the two Meyer signs are illuminated for sure. The pharmacy drive-up does not appear to be illuminated. The home and the fresh sign above each entrance are illuminated. The welcome signs are not illuminated, and the licensee signs, I believe, will be illuminated, but I'm sure that's going to be dependent upon the tenants that are
Says
located.
internally illuminated on the
Where does
report.
it say that?
So if you look at each of the
Oh.
signs, Commissioner,
Okay.
the bottom line says
Oh, I
whether
see.
the illumination is there or
Internally
not.
Some are and some aren't.
I guess I'm a little confused as to what internally illuminated means too, and I would ask the applicant to come up here and maybe tell us what that means?
Internally illuminated means that the sign is illuminated from the inside versus a light shining
Behind
upon the
it.
sign.
Gotcha. That seems to make sense.
What's the difference between it internally lit and internally illuminated?
They would be the same.
Okay.
Just words. It is kind of funny though, because it does add to the confusion, right? Does that answer your question, Commissioner?
Yeah,
Okay.
and these are 24-hour lit up.
There are no restrictions
Right.
on that.
Well, it's a 24-hour store, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Similar to what you'd have with Triggs or Metro Market. I know Shopko, when they were open, theirs was lit up 24/7, those sorts of things. We've got quite a few already that have
Typically,
that.
from a sign illumination standpoint, they don't put off that much illumination compared to that of a parking lot, which will be right in front of it. So most of the lights from the sign, the illumination from the sign will be drowned out by the parking lot.
Okay, so the parking lot is what will be like,
The parking lot will be much more illuminated than
Lit
a
up,
sign
yeah,
would be.
lit up like a regular parking lot. Hopefully they'll be choosing down lighting and minimize light pollution. I know they're,
Please.
yes, I see a nod going, yes, good, good. All right, so any comments from the audience in regards to this request? Name and address again for the record, please.
Ashley Mack with Meyer out of Grand Rapids, Michigan. So just to answer the question, yes, our parking lot will be lit. During the evening, we turn off a portion of those lights. We do light studies to make sure the light doesn't go beyond our property boundary. So we are very considerate of our neighbors. There's not a whole lot of residential around us. We are trying to be very considerate of our neighbors and so forth. So, but we do have to have the signs lit. We are open 24 hours a day, 364 days out of the year.
What day do you
what
close?
day are you closed? Yeah.
Christmas. Come on,
Christmas
guys.
Day?
Christmas
Okay.
Day,
All
not
right.
Christmas Eve. You still need to buy some groceries for Christmas Eve, but Christmas Day we do close.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant as long as she's up here?
Yes.
Nope, I think we're good. Thank you.
so much.
Commissioners, what are your wishes?
I move approval of the request with the staff recommended conditions.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Seconded by Commissioner Arnson. Further discussion? Alder Kneebone.
It seems to be in keeping with everything else that's out there. If you look at like Petco and Michael's, and it's just, I don't think this is
Or the
gonna look.
store,
Yeah, it's gonna, won't
which is
look any,
Stevens Point.
any different than anything else that's out there, so. I don't see this as a big deal.
I would agree with you. Okay, if you are in favor of approving the request for the sign variance with staff's updated recommendations, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that is approved. Item number 11 is the Community Development Department's monthly report for July 2019. Kyle, want to take the report?
Sure. So again, we've continued this summer, this year of outstanding valuation in terms of commercial and residential permits. We're just over 150 permits issued this month. Some of the more notable ones are shown in the top of the section of the report. One single family, a couple commercials. I think a lot of them this month were renovations. And hopefully we will continue to move forward throughout the rest of the building season. We've got a few more projects that are slated to start, one of which being Lullaby, and I believe Kmart as well, may potentially pull before the end of the year. So I would anticipate these numbers to continue.
Okay.
I actually have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
The declared valuation for the Windy Drive El Mezcal, 26,500, is that a?
That's just plumbing within it. So sometimes they pull separate
Right, individual
trades at
permits.
That's
different
just,
times.
okay,
That's just plumbing.
gotcha. I was gonna say, is that a typo?
Yes.
Wait, no,
Maybe
is
a
there a
pole shed.
zero missing?
Small pole shed.
Gotcha, for the
Okay,
permit.
and I think, Kyle, I want to just emphasize this a little bit more. In 2016, year-to-date permits was 493 with a valuation of about $30 million. In 2017, at the same time, we had 588 permits with about $24.6 million. In 2018, we had 750 permits with $33.8 million. And this month, as year-to-date, 815 permits, $69.4 million. I think that speaks volumes to the Community Development Department, the council, and staff in general. This is very good information. We are growing. We are not growing for the sake of growing, but we are growing smart and increasing the value, which then in turn allows us to spend a little bit more so we can bring back some of those services we've lost over the years.
Apparently it's
And
somewhat taxable.
this is what's doing it. And as I said, this is due in part to in a very big part, to the Community Development Department, which leads us to item number 12, potentially the very last director's report from Director Ostrowski.
Thank you very much. It has been an honor to serve Stevens Point. As the mayor has indicated, Stevens Point is doing very well, and it will continue to do very well. You've got a lot of large projects coming down the road, especially next year. You can see the dedication with the staff within the department, the Plan Commission, and the council. You don't always agree with staff recommendations, which was evident tonight, but that's good because we have that conversation and we get to the bottom of the issues. Kyle has done a phenomenal job. He's done a great job leading tonight, so thank you, Kyle. Maria, you continue to do a phenomenal job in putting everything together. So I wanted to say thank you. It's been really a blessing to serve Stevens Point, very tough to leave, but I know that you'll do very well in the future. So thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, our agenda is exhausted and the Plan Commission stands adjourned at 8:08.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.